Have you ever wondered just how many languages there are in the world that you've maybe never heard of? Or maybe you've heard of but just don't know that much about? Well, perhaps they are either a minority, indigenous or endangered language. But hang on a minute, are they the same thing? What does that even mean? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. We'll start with a minority language. Now, a minority language, as the name might imply, is a language that is spoken by a minority of people in a population rather than the majority. But don't be fooled, minority does not necessarily mean small, and it definitely doesn't mean meaningless. For example, some minority languages have official status. Irish is an example of this. Irish is an official language alongside English in Ireland. However, many minority languages might not have official recognition, and they may have now but may not have in the past. We'll take Catalan as an example here. Now, Catalan, estimates say around just over 4 million native speakers with 10 million speakers in total. And it's a regional co-official language in parts of Spain alongside Spanish. But this wasn't always the story. Under the Franco dictatorship in Spain, Catalan and other regional languages were banned. Use of the language was banned completely. And this and other various situations around the world is what's led to some referring to minority languages as minoritized languages, because more often than not, that is the case, where these languages have had this minority status put upon them. Now, throughout this video, I'm going to be using 6 example languages that we can check off to see if they're minority, indigenous or endangered as we go. So let's start with our 6 and see if they are minority languages. And hopefully this will help to show the difference between these 3 terms. So, language number 1, Welsh. Yes, Welsh is a minority language. Language number 2, Yucatec Maya. Yes, Yucatec Maya is a minority language. Number 3, Kristang. Kristang, yes, minority language. Number 4, Maori. Yes, minority language. Language number 5, Guarani, not a minority language. Spoken on some level of bilingualism by estimates say up to 90% of the population of Paraguay. And our final example language here is Hausa. Hausa, not a minority language. Our next term is indigenous. Now, an indigenous language means a language that is native to the place it's spoken and is spoken by indigenous people. Now, historically, the word indigenous might be associated with primitive, but this is beyond offensive. That's the first thing, let's just get that out of the way, not cool. And on top of that, just because someone lives differently to you doesn't mean that they know any less. They just know different. And different is good because there's a lot we can learn from indigenous people and languages. Knowledge about food, medicine, plants, and so much more. And finally, slight contradiction to that last point, not all indigenous people might be living as differently to you as you first imagined. So, if we go back to our list this time, let's have a look if these languages are indigenous or not. Welsh, technically yes, spoken by Welsh people in Wales, where the Welsh language is from, so yeah, I guess. Yucatec Maya, yes, spoken by Mayan people in the Yucatan Peninsula. Maori, yes, spoken where it's from by the people who were there first. Guarani, yes, spoken in Paraguay and areas of the surrounding countries where Guarani people are originally from. Interesting case though, because it's an indigenous language that's been adopted by the wider Paraguayan population who aren't all necessarily native Guarani people. Hausa, yes, spoken by Hausa people primarily in Nigeria, but not Kristang. Kristang is a Creole language, and Creole languages by their nature are all about contact between languages, and normally this involves contact between people. This means that many Kristang people who speak the Kristang language are actually descendants of Portuguese men and indigenous women, and therefore it's not like a fully indigenous language. Finally, endangered. An endangered language is, as you might imagine when we think of endangered animals, an endangered language is a language that is at risk of disappearing. And there could be many reasons for this, many reasons why a language has ended up as being endangered. It could be that a colonial language has come in and dominated the language of the area, probably by force, sometimes more naturally, mostly by force. It could be that the language has not been given a status in the wider society. It could be that a language is spoken spoken in a rural area, meaning that younger people are having to travel further afield for employment and education, meaning that they leave their native language, their mother tongue, behind. It could be that due to advances in transport and communication, younger people are seeing more benefits in learning other languages as opposed to their mother tongue. According to UNESCO, there are different grades of language endangerment. Firstly, there's languages that are doing fine. They're just hanging out over here, they're doing all right, they don't make the list. Then there's languages that are vulnerable, definitely endangered, critically endangered, severely endangered, and extinct. But all hope is not lost. Just because a language is listed as extinct doesn't mean that it's gone forever and ever and ever. There's been some wonderfully inspiring examples of language revitalisation around the world, Cornish and Manx to name just two in the United Kingdom. These revitalisation efforts take years of community and effort and dedication to make it happen, but it is possible. So now I've explained all three words: minority, minoritized, indigenous, and endangered. Let's take a look at our language examples and just show that not all of these words are one and the same. So Welsh then, how does this fare? Welsh is a minority language, an indigenous language, but is not endangered. Yucatec Maya, minority, indigenous, and endangered. Guarani is an indigenous language only. Kristang is a minority language and endangered, but not indigenous. Maori is a minority language and indigenous, but not endangered. And Hausa is indigenous, but not a minority language and not endangered. So as you can see, not all of these words mean the same thing. So hopefully then this has helped to explain these words in a little bit more detail for you and just show you that they are definitely not the same. And you know, when you hear these words now in the future, you'll know what people are talking about. You'll be like, oh yeah, I watched the video, I know. And if you want to learn more, we've got 2 whole series of language stories here on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I'll link to them in the description below. Now we've got many episodes that cover a whole cross-section of languages, not all minority, indigenous or endangered languages, but we've got 3 in particular, 3 that we used as examples in this video: Yucatec Maya, Guarani and Kristang, and I'll link to those episodes individually in the description as well. But I'd love to know, what confuses you about languages? What words and terms do you hear and think, I don't really know what that means, what does it mean? Let me know down in the description and I'll do my best to explain it in a future video. And as always, remember to subscribe for regular language learning videos. I will see you very soon. Thank you, bye!